Good evening. Tonight's story is said to be true, whispered across a Filipino village on a stormy night. A young man named Andres had just married a beautiful woman named Lita from the next town. Gentle, silent, almost too perfect. But villagers noticed something strange. At the feast she barely ate. At night their window was always left open, curtains swaying with no wind. Soon, animals were found drained of blood. Locals whispered one word, Aswang, a shapeshifter that feeds in the dark. And this tale is more than legend. Stay with me and subscribe if you dare, because beauty and terror can wear the same face. Andres was just a farm boy, the kind raised on the rhythm of rice fields and the slow toll of church bells at dawn. His hands were calloused not from choice, but from duty, ploughing mud, hauling water, tying bundles of grain under a sky that never seemed to rest. To him, vows mattered more than whispers. Gossip could vanish with the wind, but a promise, once spoken, bound a man forever. His life wasn't extraordinary, and that was its comfort. At dusk, the market square filled with chatter, neighbours bartering rice for fish, children chasing each other across puddles, the tin roofs clanging softly whenever rain tapped down. People leaned against woven baskets, trading not just food, but secrets, the kind carried from family to family like echoes. When Lita arrived, it was easy to believe life would continue in that same steady rhythm. She came from a distant province, a land shadowed by thicker forests, where mist clung longer than daylight. Together, they moved into a modest house at the edge of the paddies. By day, the pattern was always the same. Andres tilled the earth. Lita swept the yard, water from the well gleaming in buckets. At night, an oil lamp spilled soft gold across their wooden walls, and for a moment, it seemed like the world had no reason to intrude. But beneath that simplicity, something faintly off began to stir. Lita avoided meals, always pushing rice aside with a smile too quick to last. When darkness deepened, Andres would wake to find the bed empty, the door quietly ajar. Lita walked outside long after midnight, her pale figure dissolving into shadows, as if the night itself had called her by name. Still, Andres convinced himself it was nothing. Everyone has secrets, he thought. Everyone needs time alone. And what is marriage if not trust? Andres held on to that idea like he held the handle of his plough, firmly, stubbornly, without question. This was not the life of a hero, or a legend, or a man destined for horror. This was an ordinary boy, in an ordinary place, living an ordinary love. And that's why it unsettles us, because nothing in his world seemed wrong, nothing, until the first small cracks appeared. It started with small things, easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. The livestock in the village began turning up dead. First a chicken, then a goat, then the family's dog. Each body was found pale, drained of blood with 2 precise punctures at the neck. Neighbours whispered of sickness, of predators slipping through the night. But to Andres, it was easier to believe in disease than in something darker. Andres told himself nature could be cruel, nothing more. At home, life seemed normal enough. His wife Lita greeted him with soft eyes, her hair neatly brushed, her lips curved in the faintest smile. When they kissed before sleep, Andres felt a faint metallic taste on his tongue, a flash of iron, bitter, like biting his lip. Andres laughed it off in his head. She's shy, adjusting to life here, Andres told himself. It's nothing unusual. Rationalizations stacked up like bricks against a creeping unease. But unease has a way of slipping through cracks. One night, Andres woke suddenly, chest tight, sensing a void beside him. The bed was empty. The window hung wide open, curtains swaying through the night was still. Heart racing, Andres stared out across the dark horizon. And then, Just for an instant, Andres saw a figure move across the face of the moon, a silhouette stretched long, silent, impossible. When dawn came, Lita lay beside him as though she had never moved. Her hair was combed perfectly into place, her lips gently curved in repose. When Andres searched her face for answers, Lita turned her eyes away. No explanation, no acknowledgement, just that faint, unreadable smile. The villagers carried on as if nothing strange had happened. To them, dead animals could be explained. The metallic taste could be imagined. The open window could be coincidence. But to us, the audience, the signs are louder than Andres dares to admit. Each small detail is a warning, each night heavier with dread. Because when love blinds you, you tell yourself stories to keep the truth at bay. But truth has a way of showing itself. And in this village, every death, every kiss, every midnight shadow whispered the same thing. Something unnatural was living under his roof. Andres walks the lane and the village locks itself one door at a time. Latches click at his back like tiny hammers. The priest, Father Miguel, lowers his voice at the chapel steps. "Don't treat old stories like children's threats," Father Miguel says, slipping a prayer ribbon into Andres's palm. An old woman named Aling Rosa leans on her stick and smiles a riddle. The shadow walks with you. At home, his wife Lita sits by the oil lamp, weaving baskets with steady hands. Each time the flame jumps, Lita flinches and pretends it was nothing. "Are you sick?" Andres asks. Lita shakes her head and keeps weaving. The baby monitor cracks with static, though the baby Sophia sleeps. The dog watches the ceiling and refuses to cross the doorway. The strange things return, always small, always easy to explain away. A soot ring appears around the lamp. Footprints print the hallway, then stop at the crib. A draft slips under the door, even when the windows are sealed. At midnight, the roof creaks. Twice, then again. A landing without footsteps after. By morning, a child in the next house lies pale in the cradle, breathing shallow, as if something borrowed the breath and forgot to return it. Intensity climbs. The radio whispers with the volume off. The mirror shows Lita turning a heartbeat late. Andres sees his own shadow step when he stands still. Birds won't land on their roof. The well water tastes sweet, then copper, then sweet again. The house smells of frangipani, though no flowers grow nearby. Threads from her weaving gather on the floor like shed skin. Andres finds a knot of red twine under the baby Sophia's pillow. Andres tells neighbors. No one hears what he means. The grocer, Mang Thomas, laughs, sells more salt. The priest, Father Miguel, blesses the doorway and says it's stress. The doctor, Dr. Cruz, checks the baby Sophia and says exhaustion. The old woman, Aling Rosa, only nods at the road and repeats, "The shadow walks with you." Night after night, the pattern tightens. The lamp sputters. The crib rocks by itself, gently at first, then with a mother's rhythm. The roof sinks with a soft, fleshy thump. Andres stands under the rafters with the ribbon in his fist, listening to something breathe above him, and realizes he has stopped breathing to match its pace. When the roof settles, the baby Sophia smiles, asleep, and Lita's weaving finally stops, for one beat. The trail of broken twigs and damp soil led Andres deeper into the forest, his flashlight beam trembling as if it knew what waited ahead. The night was cold, but when Andres stepped into the clearing, every breath froze in his chest. The moon spilled silver across the ground, and there, at the center, Lita stood. Or rather something that used to be her. Lita's back arched at an impossible angle, as though bones had rearranged themselves in defiance of nature. Skin tore and stretched, and from beneath it burst vast, leathery wings, black and veined, beating against the night air with a thunderous thud. The sound wasn't just noise, it vibrated through Andres's ribs, shaking his heart like a drum. Lita's mouth glistened wet in the moonlight, and as Lita lifted her head, blood dripped in bright threads between her teeth. The last shudder of the dying dog collapsed at her feet, its silence more terrible than its cries. Then Lita looked at Andres. Lita's eyes glowed faint red, not like flame, but like the last embers of a fire buried deep in ash. It was not rage in her stare, it was recognition. The same woman Andres had eaten dinner with, laughed beside, trusted with his secrets, now wearing a smile thin as a blade's edge. That smile cut through Andres more brutally than any claw. The forest seemed to close in, every tree leaning forward, every shadow pressing down. Andres's lungs refused air. Andres's knees weakened, but he couldn't run, couldn't even scream. The wings beat once more, the gust stinking of iron and decay, and the blood on Lita's lips caught the light like rubies. There was no legend anymore, no whispered rumor or story to dismiss. The truth stood before Andres, alive, monstrous, and hungry, and Andres was alone in its gaze, caught, powerless, a heartbeat away from becoming its next silence. Andres staggered back home, just as the sky began to pale with dawn. Andres's shirt was torn, his breath shallow, his steps uneven. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the click of a latch, felt like something following too close. When Andres finally reached the front door, relief should have washed over him, but instead, dread curled in his stomach. Inside, Lita was already there. Lying on the bed, her hair smooth across the pillow, her dress spotless, her chest rising and falling as though Lita had been asleep all night. No mud, no scratches, no sign that Lita had ever left the room. Andres's throat tightened. Andres knew what he had seen. Andres knew Lita had slipped out into the darkness, moving like water through wood. Yet here Lita was, immaculate, innocent, as if Andres's terror had been nothing but a fever dream. But the house itself betrayed Andres. Every window looked different now. Their frames no longer promised sunlight and air. They gaped like mouths, waiting to swallow Andres whole. Andres could not look too long without feeling pulled into their silent hunger. That night, Andres tried to stay awake. Salt and garlic, blessed by the priest Father Miguel, lay heavy in Andres's palm. Andres's knuckles trembled as he gripped them tighter, knowing it was the only line of defense Andres had left. Then came the whisper. Soft, right at Andres's ear. "Why are you afraid of me?" Andres froze. Andres's breath locked in his chest. Slowly, Andres turned, but Lita was not on the bed. Lita was already climbing out the window, her body sliding through the frame as if Lita were liquid, not flesh. Lita's hair brushed the wood, her dress left no wrinkle, and Lita was gone into the night. Andres's legs wanted to follow, to stop Lita, to demand an answer. But Andres's hands shook too violently, the salt spilling between his fingers like useless sand. Andres stayed rooted in place, trembling. The garlic clutched against his heart. Andres had escaped, yes, survived the night, but survival felt hollow. Andres's trust in the world had collapsed, and every shadow, every window, every silence now promised only one truth. Andres would never truly be safe again. The old priest Father Miguel sat across from Andres, voice low, as though afraid the walls themselves might be listening. Father Miguel's eyes were clouded but steady. "The Aswang is no bedtime story," Father Miguel said. "By day it wears flesh and bone. By night, hunger takes its true shape. They marry men, build homes on the village edge, not for love, but for cover, so they can leave under the cloak of darkness, unnoticed." The words landed like stones in Andres's chest. Andres wanted to laugh, to call it superstition, but every detail Father Miguel spoke pressed against memories Andres had tried to dismiss. The untouched meals, his wife Lita smiling politely at the dinner table, pushing food around but never eating. The faint metallic taste on Andres's lips whenever Andres kissed Lita goodnight, the kind that made his tongue recoil without knowing why. The windows, always left slightly ajar, curtains swaying though no breeze passed. Now the pieces clicked together with merciless clarity. These were not quirks of a shy, mysterious woman. They were signs. Camouflage for a predator living in Andres's home, wrapped in the guise of a bride. Father Miguel leaned closer, whispering as if to seal the truth inside Andres's bones. Their hunger cannot be cured. They pass among us because daylight hides them. But when night comes, the mask falls. And once you see it, truly see it, there is no going back. Images flooded Andres's mind. The drained livestock, the shadow slipping across the moon. Lita's hair perfectly combed at dawn, as though Lita had never left the bed. Andres thought of the laughter at their wedding, of neighbors congratulating him, of Andres's vows spoken with sincerity, and beneath it all, a creeping realization that his marriage had never been what Andres believed. Andres sat frozen, his breath shallow. The world tilted, not because Father Miguel's tale was too wild, but because it made perfect sense. Every whisper, every warning Andres had dismissed as village superstition, now stood revealed as truth. The Aswang was not in the forest, not lurking beyond the rice fields. It was in Andres's home, sharing his bed, smiling at Andres with lips that hid teeth meant for feeding. And Andres knew, with a clarity that tore him open, that nightfall would never look the same again. What would you do if the person beside you in bed wasn't fully human? Would you cling to the vows you made under the church bells? Or would you bolt the window and pray never to see their eyes again? That's the lingering question of the Aswang legend. It forces us to weigh loyalty against survival. In many Filipino communities, old practices survive in subtle ways. Salt tucked above the doorframe, garlic braided by the window, children ordered home before midnight. These aren't just quaint traditions. They are fragments of a collective memory, defenses shaped by centuries of fear. The Aswang is more than a monster. It's a symbol of how danger can hide behind beauty and how love itself can blur the line between trust and terror. Even today, rural households whisper about strange sounds on stormy nights or livestock found drained in the morning. Each story retold keeps the boundary between safety and threat alive. So what do you think? If you woke to find your window ajar, would you reach for the salt or for your spouse's hand? Comment window if you dare lock it tonight, and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale that walks the line between legend and life.